I stood frozen on the porch, heart hammering in my chest, as a massive wrecking ball swung through the air and crashed into the front wall of our family's nursing home. Bricks crumbled like sand. Windows exploded outward. My parents' life's work, our home, was collapsing before my eyes. I'd heard of people losing everything in an instant, but I never thought I'd live through it. And it wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated. A plan hatched behind closed doors by people we had once called neighbors. But what they didn't count on was me. And they definitely didn't count on a bulldozer and some quick-dry cement changing everything. "It's happening again," Mom whispered, handing me a certified letter bearing the dreaded HOA logo. Her hands trembled as I opened it. My stomach dropped. It was our third violation notice this year. I peered out our living room window, catching sight of Mrs. Evelyn Carr from across the street, pretending to prune her roses. They were already perfect, but her eyes never left our house. I never imagined we'd be at war with our homeowners association when my parents converted our Pine Ridge Valley home into Maple Glen assisted living 5 years ago. But here we were. Dad, a retired physician, and Mom, a nurse for over 3 decades, had sunk their entire savings and their hearts into this home. We weren't a corporate elder care chain. We weren't a cold, sterile facility. We were family. And our residents? They were family too. "Let me see that," I said, taking the letter. The polished legal jargon couldn't hide its intent. Cease all business operations within 30 days or face legal action. "They can't do this," I muttered. "We have permits," Dad added firmly, stepping in from a sunroom where he'd been playing chess with Mr. Halvorson, one of our 8 residents. "We've been through this before," Dad said grimly. "Evelyn Carr doesn't care about permits. She wants us gone." I watched as Evelyn's son, Brad Carr, pulled up in his gleaming black Range Rover. He ran an upscale elder care chain 2 towns over, charging triple what we did. Every month he offered to buy our property. Every month my parents refused. "I'll handle this," I promised. As a paralegal at Whitmore and Reed, I knew enough about the law to buy us time. Maybe not enough to win, but enough to fight back. The next morning, I walked to Evelyn's house. Her garden gnomes glared at me as I knocked on her pristine door. She answered without opening it fully, her face a mask of polite disdain. "Caroline," she said coldly, "what can I do for you?" "I want to talk about this letter," I said, forcing a friendly tone. "There's been a misunderstanding. Our permits are in order." "It's not about permits anymore," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "It's about property values. The board has decided that a business doesn't belong in Pine Ridge." "Business?" I repeated. "You're talking about 8 seniors living in a home. 2 ambulance visits in a year is hardly too many," she snapped. "And all those visitors? Those cars? It's disruptive." "The board meeting is Thursday," she continued. "You're welcome to plead your case. But the decision is nearly finalized." As I turned to leave, I noticed Brad sitting smugly in her living room, scrolling through his phone. Our eyes met. He looked away. That night, as I helped Mrs. Adler, our 91-year-old resident, into bed, she squeezed my hand. "They're not going to make us leave, are they, dear?" "No, I promija. I won't let them." But I wasn't so sure. The board meeting was a farce. 7 people sat behind a long table in the clubhouse, Evelyn at the center like a self-appointed queen. I presented our case, permits, letters of support from neighbors, even a commendation from mayor. It didn't matter. "We've already voted," Evelyn declared before I finished. "Maple Glen violates our residential covenant. You have 30 days. They're not clients," I corrected through clenched teeth. "They're residents. Some have lived here longer than you." "Regardless," she said flatly, "we expect compliance." The next week was war. HOA inspectors showed up daily, measuring grass height, citing us for tiny cracks in the sidewalk, bird feeders out of regulation. They fined us for Mr. Halvorson's wheelchair ramp, claiming it was an unauthorized structure. I filed appeals, called the county, even contacted a local reporter. But after initial interest, he stopped returning calls. "We should just sell," Mom said one night after a $500 fine for improper waste disposal, because a box from Mr. Halvorson's oxygen tank delivery had sat on our porch for an hour. Oh, insista. This is their home. Then came Brad's offer, 20% above market value. Take it or leave it. 48 hours. They're trying to wear us down, I told my parents. Let me try one more thing. That night, I dug through county records until I found it. The original 1973 subdivision plan. Our property was zoned differently, grandfathered for multifamily use. I called an old friend from law school, Tara Lynn. She was a real estate attorney. This might work, she said after reviewing the documents. They can't override a grandfather clause. I was preparing to present this at the next HOA meeting when Mom and Dad announced they were going to Chicago for a medical conference. Dad was presenting his research on elder care. Go, I told them. I've got this. They left that weekend. None of us knew it was the last time they'd see our home intact. 2 nights later, I noticed unusual activity at the HOA office. Cars coming and going, lights on past midnight. Through binoculars, I saw Evelyn arguing with Brad. Something was wrong. The next morning, it happened. At dawn, I woke to the sound of machinery. I ran to the window. A demolition crane loomed over our yard. The wrecking ball swung. I bolted downstairs. Mr. Halvorson was already trying to will himself outside. What's happening? He asked, voice shaking. Get everyone to the back door. I yelled. Outside, Evelyn stood calmly behind a makeshift barrier, clipboard in hand. The crane swung again, shattering our front window. Our home exposed like a dollhouse. Stop, I screamed, running toward the operator. He hesitated, glancing at Evelyn. She nodded. Section 8, Paragraph 4, she announced coldly. No commercial enterprises in residential zones. This is insane, I shouted. You were notified, she said, holding up an official-looking document. I tried to rush her, but was stopped by 2 security guards I hadn't noticed. The ball swung again, collapsing my parents' bedroom. By the time the police arrived, half our house was rubble. Officer Daniels listened as I explained, but Evelyn cut in, presenting papers. Court-approved emergency demolition, she said smoothly. Safety concerns. That's a lot, I yelled. We have permits. They were revoked, she said with a thin smile. Foreclosure for unpaid fines. Special assessment, $25,000. We never got any notice. Delivered yesterday, she said. Certified mail. I wanted to scream. I moved the residence to a neighbor's yard as the wrecking continued. Mrs. Adler clutched her chest. Mr. Halvorson sobbed quietly. Tara arrived later and scanned the paperwork. This isn't a demolition order, she said. It's a nuisance complaint. Officer Daniels frowned. There's a judge's signature. For the wrong property, Tara snapped. Oakwood Lane, not Oakwood Drive. He finally called a halt, but it was too late. The wrecking ball finished its work. Evelyn watched the dust settle. Clean up by Sunday, she said, or we'll fine you for blight. What followed was chaos. We found temporary housing at the community center. Our residents were homeless. Their belongings? Destroyed. But I wasn't giving up. Tara and I dug deeper. We uncovered records of HOA rule changes never voted on. Financial ties between Brad and the HOA accounts. Video footage of Evelyn taking an envelope from Brad in the parking lot. This is corruption, Tara said. We went to the police. The DA launched an investigation. But it wasn't enough for me. I bought an old bulldozer at an auction. Told the seller I ran a landscaping business. Late one night, I drove it to the HOA office. On the 11th. 20 minutes later, the HOA office was gone. I poured quick-dry cement over the rubble. Painted lines. Planted a sign, Maple Glen Visitor Parking. The next morning, the police and press arrived. Reporters swarmed our home. Evelyn lost it on camera, screaming about our illegal nursing home. She accidentally confessed to ordering the demolition of Maple Glen. The DA's case exploded. Brad was arrested for fraud. Evelyn was charged with elder abuse and illegal demolition. 6 weeks later, we reopened Maple Glen. Our home. Our family. And as Mrs. Adler moved back into her room, now freshly painted her favorite color, she smiled at me. Sometimes, she said, you have to break things to fix them. And sometimes, I thought, karma just needs a little push.